This is for Alex. I'm going to go over checking the outside temperature sensor from the instrument cluster to the outside temperature sensor, because you're getting that reading of negative 40 degrees. I'm going to start with the wiring diagram so you can see how this system works. It's actually a pretty simple system. This is your instrument cluster right here. This is your temperature sensor. This terminal 15 right here is the power supply in, so there's power going to pin 2, and then this is actually the ground side, which is a monitored ground right here through the instrument cluster. So this is only a 2-wire circuit, and it actually doesn't matter which way you wire the temperature sensor on this end. If this is flipped around, it's still going to read a resistance reading where your voltage is going to drop a certain amount through your temperature sensor, and then your instrument cluster interprets that as the temperature in which it displays in the instrument cluster. So if we take a look at the pins, you have pin 1 from the instrument cluster going to pin 2 at the temperature sensor, and then we have pin 2 at the instrument cluster, which is the ground side. Now this is at connector X11178, so I have a picture of that connector. We are going to have to take the instrument cluster off, and I'm going to go through some wiring checks and probably short out mine so you can see the differences, and then show you where that wire routes through the vehicle, and hopefully you'll find the issue. It's most likely still a wiring concern. There's also a couple things you can do, which is for testing purposes, hardwire the temperature sensor directly to the instrument cluster inside the vehicle, just to test the instrument cluster itself. Take a look at the location of the connector, and I've already looked that up to make it easy. This is the instrument cluster removed, and we're looking at the back side of the instrument cluster. Actually, what looks like the grill's over here, so this looks like a right-hand drive vehicle, but it shouldn't really matter. We should be able to find the correct connector. It says 18-pin natural, so I think that's going to be a white connector. I think that's what they mean by natural. And we have this style here, so I'm going to go ahead and show you how to remove that instrument cluster as well. The wiring colors may be different. You can never 100% trust a wiring diagram, but it does look like the power side is BL/RT, that's blue and red. And then for the negative side, you can see right here it actually says AT negative and AT outside temp positive. The negative is blue and brown. And that's also going to be another way to help us identify that from the instrument cluster. Let's start at the instrument cluster. Alright, so there's the outside temp, 45 degrees inside my garage. Obviously you would have the BC button over here on the side, and that's how you're going to scroll through for these displays. So we want to make sure that that temperature display comes up, and I believe yours is going to be reading negative 40. So the next thing I'm going to do is remove this instrument cluster to access that 18-pin connector. Actually, before removing the instrument cluster, let's play a little bit with the outside temp sensor and see what kind of different readings I can get in the instrument cluster. On my E46, the temperature sensor is located in the left side or driver's side wheel well. Normally you're going to have a cover that goes in this location here. When I purchased this vehicle, it was already broken off and the temp sensor was completely destroyed. And as you know, because you watched my other video on how to do the repair for the temp sensor, that I've already done the wiring. So if anybody else is watching this, I have a video on how to repair the wiring and rewire an outside temp sensor, and then you can actually tie it up in the wheel well. Now I did use some extra wiring, so this is pretty convenient. I can actually pull this all the way out here and actually flip it up top and catch it right here, so that we can do some quick tests. So this is the outside temp sensor, and the connector and the wiring that you're going to get. To remove it, obviously you have this little plug right here. Pop that off. So right now, with this unplugged, and if I look inside here, there's actually 2 male pins, and then on this side is the 2 female pins. Put that temp sensor down. So basically this is an open circuit now, because the temp sensor is what completes the circuit. So let's see what the instrument cluster shows when I have an open circuit. Now I have the key in the ignition with the door open, which that beeping is absolutely annoying. One little trick you can do is actually, if you close the latch just by hand, it sends the signal that the door is shut, and that beeping stops. I find that very annoying. Alright, so let's take a look here. So right now I have an open circuit. So the wiring is not complete to the instrument cluster because the sensor is really what completes that circuit, you know, and through the wiring itself. -40. So this is what you're experiencing. Somewhere you have a break in the circuit, and because it can't complete the circuit, it's going to always show up as -40. Now you may also have, for other people that are watching this video, have the opposite. So I'm actually going to create a short. So let's do like it was a wire-to-wire short. This is just an airbag harness that I have with male pins that I should be able to slide into this connector. There we go. On both sides. Okay, and then on my opposite end I have the 2 female connectors. So I'm just going to hopefully be able to wrap this up here so they touch together. Oh, I might need an alligator clip. Alright, let's see. So I have these 2 wires here. I'm going to touch them together. I'm going to hold them together with the alligator clip. Attempt to. There we go. Okay. So that's basically a wire-to-wire short through the connector itself. So let's take a look and see what that does. If both wires are shorted together somewhere in the harness, I'm pretty sure it's going to actually show the -40. Yep. Alright, so you could have an open or a wire-to-wire short before the sensor. And that would be for what's happening on your vehicle, Alex. The other option for reading positive 122 would be a short to ground. I can simulate a short to ground just by taking the other end of the alligator clip and attaching it to a chassis ground. And I still have that connector there, and basically I'm just on the connector. Now if you notice I left the key on, it's still reading -40. You actually have to have the key off and wait a couple of minutes for the instrument cluster to update. And with a short to ground, you're going to read 122 degrees Fahrenheit positive. Now I want to look at the output voltage from the cluster to the connector. So at the connector, I just have, I'm using this male pin that fits inside the connector right here. If you have to, you might have to access some of the sheathing and then put some sealant on it, or do a wire repair. Clear silicone works pretty well. So I'm going to go into the positive side of the connector, And I just want to check to see what kind of voltage signal that we normally see from the instrument cluster. It's not going to be much, it might be around a 5-volt reference. So I'm going to go from there, which is my power in, to ground. And it looks like I'm getting 3.34 volts. So that's the power that's being sent through that sensor, and then when it grounds out and the resistance reading through the sensor is what gives the instrument cluster the value. The next step would be to check the wiring between the instrument cluster and the connector. So the next step is to remove the instrument cluster. You have two torque screws here and here, T20. Go ahead and remove the instrument cluster. These two out, and grab right up here, and if you have a little screwdriver, you can stick it in there to help bring that out. Make sure your steering wheel's all the way down and out, and then you can fold this down. You can see this is the back of the cluster right here. Let's see if I can get a better shot. Here's that natural color connector right here, and this comes off by pressing. There's a little lock tab right on top. You're going to press down on that lock tab, and that black tab, so I push that lock tab down, this black tab slides out to remove that connector. And this should be the wiring for the outside temp sensor. I removed the instrument cluster so you can see this better. Right on the back side of that natural connector is a little plastic tab that you pull down on, and once it releases, you might need a little screwdriver. You can slide out this internal black. Let's see. Yeah, I think I need a screwdriver. Alright, that little tab right there, pry that tab back. And then I'm just going to give that a little pull, and that's going to pop this piece off. You can remember how it goes on. You can see the way that the wiring goes. Obviously, pin side down, and then you can see the wiring's going to lead in that direction. So I'm going to take a look at this right here, and take a look at those pins and wire colors. So looking at the wire colors and the pins, pin 1 is positive, pin 2 is negative, and for my vehicle it is blue with a red stripe for pin 1 and blue with a brown stripe for pin 2. So my wire here is good, so you want to make sure that your colors are good, and it is in pin 1 and 2 in this smaller connector right here with that white connector. These are two little locking tabs. Let's see if I can show you how to take those out just in case you need to. Alright, let's see if I can do this here. You need a pick, and you need to push on the tab, and at the same time, you could always cut some of this sheathing to give yourself a little bit more room too. I need to get in a position to be able to pull back on that wire. This is the locking tab. Let me get in the right view here. Where'd it go? Alright, come on. Out of focus. There's a little locking tab right on top that you press down with a pick, and then you can slide that back and work that pin out. It's going to get caught in the second spot Again, same thing, press down. Slide back in. It's got a lock there. Let's try it this way so I can put some pressure on it. Push down on that. There we go. Okay, so let me do a close-up of that little locking tab. Without getting too blurry. Right on the very top is a tiny little raised portion, which you just have to push gently with a pick to slide it out of the housing. So if you have something where you can slide it in here for testing, you'd be all set. You might want to cut back some of the sheathing, especially, you're going to be troubleshooting the difficult problem you haven't opened somewhere. So you could leave the pins in the housing if they're correct, cut back the sheathing where it's comfortable for you to do a wire repair. Then you could snip the wire and strip it out a little bit so that you have two leads sticking out right here and on the harness, body harness side for testing purposes. For me, it would be easier to slide these out, and then I can actually connect here and then check continuity to the other side pin. So what you're going to want to do now is you're going to be looking for that open. You're going to want to check each wire one at a time from here to your connector or to each individual wire. So this is pin 1, so I just have an alligator lead attached to pin 1, and I have it run to the negative side of my voltmeter. And come up here to my voltmeter, and then I have another lead on the positive side of my connector. Now if you have bare wires and these are just cut somewhere, it might make it more convenient for testing, and then you can wire it up after, like my other video. You can always cut a wire and strip it back for testing. So then I'm checking the continuity of that pin, pin 1, to the connector pin. So if I turn this on, I have 0.7 ohms. So basically what I'm checking is that wire is good. I don't have an open in that wire. If you did have an open in the wire, it's going to look like OL. You probably know that if you have a voltmeter. I'm somewhat familiar. Let's see if I can separate this. Right, or on mine I just got a line, but alright, so good continuity, and then that's what I expect you're going to see on one of the wires that you have, or potentially both. So you're going to need to check pin 2 the same way if you have a probe that you could put in there, and then also check it back to the instrument cluster, pin 2, and you're looking for an open wire. Now something that you can do for trial purposes, if you have if you've cut this end off and you have the wires exposed at the instrument cluster, you could just wire just by twisting the wires together and do a direct connection between the sensor and the wiring in the instrument cluster inside the car. So you could just run the wire inside the car with a little bit of a pigtail, wire it to the harness side, plug this in, make sure your connector is back connected to the instrument cluster, and cycle the key on to verify that the cluster is not the problem. That would be the only way to prove out the cluster 100%, would be a direct wire to the instrument cluster at those. So basically back here at the cluster, you'd put that pin back in, or leave it in if you're having trouble getting these out because you don't want to break it. Cut this back, snip it where it's easy to do a repair, right about here. So then you have your two pigtails off your wire, and then you'd have your other connector and the wire. Just wire them together right here, just twist them together, and turn your cluster on with that plugged back in. Let your sensor sit right on top of your dash, and check to see what your instrument cluster reads. That would prove that your cluster is good, and it's not the instrument cluster. I don't suspect it to be the instrument cluster, but there is always the possibility that the internal circuit of the cluster is the problem. also doing the wire test from here out to the vehicle harness is going to also check to see if the wiring is bad on the vehicle harness side. If you do find that the wire is suspect and you've already wired it to the combi, the cluster, and it works, I would check in this wheel well. So you want to follow your wire up, and it goes into this harness right here. Right, so you want to make sure that you have all this sheathing. You want to take a razor blade and you're going to want to unwrap all of this sheathing. Now the harness is actually going up this way here, and then it goes into this harness at this junction right here, and it's coming up this way. So that's actually up in behind the wheel arch, but there's an easier way to check that. So you want to check your wire all the way up to here. The wiring is going to come up behind your side marker light. Depending on your model year, you're going to access that through a little screw right here. You might have a Phillips head screw, but on my vehicle I have a press clip. So I put a screwdriver down into this little slot right here and just push down on a little retainer tab. And I have a video on this as well that maybe goes over a little bit more detail. And I'm going to slide this out. I could just put that aside. You can see right here, there's my harness. It's coming up along here. There's a zip tie right there, so you could pop that off. You could actually pull this harness all the way up this way here, because it's coming right through here. So this is also where the harness is, and then it's going to enter the main harness here and then run up along the side and then continue going this way right here. Once you're at this point, it's going to get a lot more difficult. So you might want to consider running your own wires down through the dash and into the engine compartment through the bulkhead, and then attaching them, run it through here, attach it. But most likely your wiring issue is from here down. So you would unwrap the sheathing, separate those two wires, work your way back. Remember, it's an open, so the wire itself might look good on the outside, but the inside is cut. So the only way you could really do an easy repair will be to find the two wires further up here, once you've opened it all the way up, snip them here, and then verify continuity from here to the instrument cluster. Once you know that you have two good wires coming out, you could do a repair here and run two new wires down for your temp sensor. That's really going to be the simplest way to solve this, especially if you're having a continuing issue trying to figure out where this wire break is. Alex, you'll have to let me know what you find. Hopefully this video is helpful. Like I said, most likely the break is going to be somewhere in this section right here, but in a pinch you would have to do a full rewire from inside the car from the cluster, pins 1 and 2, natural connector, out into the engine bay so that you can wire your outside temp sensor correctly. Good luck, and I hope you find it soon.